What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to Commander Ad Populum. Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. I'm your host, Ryan. This is episode 4. It's me in the studio, talking to the walls again. Welcome. We got a super jam-packed show today, so I'd like to get right into it, but a few thank yous first of all. If you've noticed, I've got a logo. Huge thank you and shout out to Brent Bertoft. Brent was kind enough to get in touch, and he's got a little bit of skill. He set up some things. It's fairly straightforward and quite a simple logo, but that's part of the reason that I love it. I've got 2 different versions, and if I ever get any Commander Ad Populum merch, you might see one version or the other. But it's simple. It includes all the 5 colors of Magic. It very much looks like the Olympic rings, which I really like. So you'll see that across the Facebook, Twitter, Podomatic pages, all the platforms that I'm on. That's where you'll see that now. So huge thank you to Brent. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody else who was involved or submitted logos. I very much appreciate it. And I'm going to save them all because you never know when, a secondary piece of merch or something might come out where I want to switch it up or change it up or put a different logo or sticker on something. So huge thank you to everybody who was involved with that. Before I get into the community topic today, I'd like to let everybody know how they can find me or how they can submit their own community topic. You can get at me on Twitter at CADPopcast, or you can shoot me an email, cadpopcast@gmail.com. You can get in touch with me on Facebook by searching Commander Ad Populum. I come up there. And of course, patreon.com/CADPopcast. If you have any ideas of what you'd like to see, if you would like to pledge, let me know, shoot me a message on there. I'm kind of using it as a platform for altars and the podcast. So everything that's a part of my solo project is all going to be there. That all being said, let's get right into the community section for the day. This is a really feel-good story, and it's not related to me in any way or anybody that I know. About a month ago, I was contacted through the Commander Cookout Patreon page by a listener named Joseph. Joseph's from the San Bernardino area in Southern California, and he had gotten my message saying, hey, we're looking for some ideas about the Commander community and Magic the Gathering as a whole. So Joseph said that he works for a non-profit agency that provides intensive treatment foster care, or ITFC, as he calls it. And he works with a range of foster kids who are assessed to have some kind of need, an emotional, behavioral need, physical need, whatever it is. He is a home support counselor for these kids. That's what he does. He works as part of a team with each child as with a clinician and a therapist and a social worker, and he works with kids that are primarily between the ages of 6 to 18. So Joseph says he primarily sees kids that struggle with some form of aggressive behavior, whether that be verbally or physically. He sees lots of kids that have difficulty with impulse control, and he sees a lot of kids that might not be able to control their actions. Like in a game, if they lose, they flip over the table, or they threaten to beat the person up that beat them at the game or whatever, right? So he says where magic comes into it all, because that's what this is about, right? The power of magic and how it can help people and change people's lives in whatever community that it exists in. He says where magic comes into it all is where he introduces magic to these kids that he's trying to help. And when we're talking about impulse control or emotional control, he gives the example of not attacking with your Galta dinosaur into a 1/1 with Death Touch, because then, of course, your 12/12 will just die, right? He says it helps them work on not giving up when it looks like the game is not in your favor. Good sportsmanship, knowing the difference between right and wrong. And he says he does allow some smack talk because, you got to let kids be kids a little bit, right? But the good sportsmanship thing is after the game is over, win or lose, learning to accept the loss or be a graceful winner or a graceful loser, and extending the hand, thanking the person for the game, and saying good game, whether you win or lose, right? Of course, the kids he teaches Magic to love it, and all of the teachers he talks to that are part of the program or are involved in what he does say that they notice a difference and improvement in the kids, right? So that's awesome. He sent this to me about a month ago. That was, or just over a month ago, right when War of the Spark spoilers were coming out. And he said a big thing, a big teaching point for these kids as well is looking at spoilers and trying to decipher or contextualize where they would fit into current decks that these kids have. And he says mostly he's playing modified precons or like brawl decks because a lot of the cards he gets are donated from local game stores and stuff. And that's awesome all by itself, right? Like, here's a guy helping kids who's getting donations from other players in the community and the local game store and stuff. And when new stuff is coming out, these kids look at the spoilers with Joseph and they try to decide where their decks need to be modified. Oh, is this better than this? Why is this better? This costs less mana. Can I fit this in? Can I splash for this? All these things, right? All the things that we do as Magic players. These kids are learning, and it's helping them become better young adults. It's helping them learn how to receive an education and fit into society. It's helping them maybe even repair any wrongdoings or damage that have been done to them throughout their young lives, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that really hits home with me because, man, oh man, that's for sure something that we could all learn from. And these kids, I mean, kids are like sponges, right? Like if they're surrounded by negativity, they're going to pick up negativity, right? If they're surrounded by positivity and teaching and anything like that, they're going to pick that up, right? So huge shout out to Joseph. Huge shout out to what he's doing. If you have seen or are in a similar situation, let me know. Let me know not only what you're doing, but where you're from, how anybody's responding to it, and how anybody else can help you if you're looking for any help. So that's super awesome. Fast forward a month or a month and a half, we are just about at Modern Horizons spoilers. I think when this episode comes out, it'll be the middle of the week, a Wednesday of the week that Modern Horizons spoilers have started. So I hope everybody's enjoying those. I know I'm excited. It's still a few days out for me from when I'm recording this. So instead of talking about that, last week I had mentioned that we are going to delve into a few of my decks and start to understand a little bit more of how I build and how I approach Magic. I'd say I approach deck building from a very technical and a very theoretical standpoint. And I do approach it from a very a standpoint in which I want to optimize my decks. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to tune them to be the best version of the deck, right? Or that I want to pick a commander that allows me to be as competitive as possible. That's not what I'm saying. And while I do have CEDH decks, I do also embrace and very much love the jank, right? Have you heard my other show? Anyways, I'll give you some examples. I've got all of my commanders sitting in front of me. You'll probably hear me on the microphone flipping through them all as I read them all off. And in no particular order, because I know some people like to, like if you have 10 decks and you want to rank them in a certain power level order, you're going to want like a 1 that's super janky. You're going to want a 2, a 3, a 4 that are like okay, but not optimized. 5, 6, 7 that are like powerful and good, but not very competitive. Then your 8, 9, 10s are the ones that are going to be swinging with the competitive decks, optimized. You don't care about any cards in them. Anything can get cut because you want it to be as powerful as it can be, right? And I don't do that. I don't think that I have a ranking on any one of my decks. I know if they're optimized and powerful or optimized and not powerful. I know if they're jank and optimized, right? Like that's how I look at it. And when I say optimized, what I'm referring to is, do they have an appropriate amount of spot removal and sweepers for my meta? Are the lands, is the mana base and the ramp tuned to how much colored mana or mana in general the deck needs? Is there a distinct mana curve or a sequence of events that I need to follow in order to do what the deck wants to do? All these kinds of things, right? Is it tuned around the commander? So when I say optimized, that's the kind of stuff that I mean. Not like, I run a Edric deck that is optimized because it has only 1-drop creatures, right? That's not what I mean. So getting into it, this is what I got in front of me. I've got Elenda the Dusk Rose. She's a 1/1 for black-white 2 lifelink. Whenever a creature dies, any creature, put a +1/+1 counter on her. When Elenda dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink where X is Elenda's power. So this is my version of the black-white, sort of life-gainy, sort of aristocrats deck. It's got an awesome mana base, fetches and duels and filter lands and all that jazz. So it's got a great mana base. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it that I very much like. Like I'm talking about old school from Urza's Destiny or something, Phyrexian Plague Lord. It's got a bunch of Wrath effects and then a bunch of reanimation because I'm going to let Elenda go to the graveyard. Her ability actually doesn't trigger unless she goes to the graveyard, not the command zone. So she's tons of fun. I've got a 5-color deck in Child of Alara. This is actually my lands deck. If you know the Legacy lands deck that runs like 42 lands, this is the functional equivalent. Except I'm running, I think, 63 land. And that does include a 10 Guildgate and Maze's End package, which I have won with a couple of times. I know that's a thing for some people. But mostly it's extra land per turn, land from your graveyard, and it does include an ad nauseum into Sickening Dreams combo where you cast ad nauseum for 5. You draw cards off the top, or you reveal cards off the top of your deck, losing life equal to their converted mana cost until you want to stop. So in a 63 land deck, what that means is like I draw 50 cards or something, right? And then Sickening Dreams, as an additional cost to cast it, you discard X amount of cards. And it deals X damage to each creature and each player. Sounds terrible because it's going to kill me, but I actually play a Glacial Chasm as one of the lands, and that prevents all the damage to me. That's great, right? And it plays like Diabolic Revelation, so I can go like tap X to tutor for X. You just tutor for 10 Guildgates in your Maze's End, and then you just find them all and untap your Maze's End and win the game. So it's got some kind of ways with lands to just finish the game. Super fun. Next is Rakdos, Lord of Riots. This is a super aggro deck, and it does play a ton of big Eldrazi's, and most of the creatures that have colored mana, like Inferno Titan, Grave Titan, whatever, have enter the battlefield effects, so you attack or you find some way to deal a bunch of damage. And then you play these creatures for free or for 1 or 2 mana, and you get extra bonus from them on top of it. My favorite play in this deck is something like Heartless Hidetsugu. You tap them to deal damage equal to half of everybody's life total to those people. And then you play a Mega Traitor to Mortals. And you declare X in Mega Traitor to Mortals mana cost. You declare that equal to the life that everybody lost this turn. And then Rakdos reduces Mega's mana cost equal to the amount of life everybody lost. And then one player, when Mega enters a battlefield, loses that much life. So you take half their life, and then you take the rest of their life with 2 cards. It's pretty fun. Next, we've got Smithy's The Slumbering Isle. This is a new Simic deck I'm working on, and it's pretty control-y. The win condition is like animating my 12/12 Smithy's and then swinging in for commander damage, or like giving them infect or something. But it runs like counterspell and lots of draw cards and some pump effects and some mana dorks, all like 1 and 2 drop stuff just to remove counters from Smithy's. It's a new one. I'm working on it. It's fun. Mistform Ultimus is next. This is like my pimp deck. This one's all foiled and everything, right? So Mistform Ultimus is every creature type, and he's a 3/3 for 4. That's it. So it plays Merfolk Tribal, Ally Tribal, Wizard Tribal, and then some hardcore control elements, and it's all foiled and altered, and it's really fun. This is the tribal deck that I'm going to be bringing to Magic Fest Vegas. So if anybody wants to sit down and just jam tribal, this is it. Mistform Ultimus, he's the king of tribes. Now here we go, Boros. I got my Bryon Stout Arm deck. This is like fling deck. It plays a lot of big creatures, actually surprisingly, lots of recursion in white, right? So if I fling my guy, then I just get it back with Resurrection or Karmic Guide or what have you, right? And the goal of the deck is try to make as big of mana as you can in Boros with a bunch of mana rocks, right? So it's a little bit weak to Vandal Blast type effects, and it's a little bit slow, but once it gets rolling, it's got a super high top end, because really you're just jamming like all the best angels in Boros. Volrath the Fallen is my mono black deck. This one is like, if I did rank my decks from 1 to 10, this would be a 1. It's so janky, and it's just a trick, right? So he's a 6/4 that has black 1, discard a creature card from your hand. Volrath gets +X until end of turn, where X is the discarded card's converted mana cost. So basically you just discard like Blightsteel's and Emrakul's Crusher or whatever his name, Ulamog's Crusher, Platinum Empyrean. You just discard things that cost like Draco is in the deck just for Brando, because when you discard Draco, he gets +16, and he attacks in for like 22 damage. Pretty awesome, but super janky. Next is my Vivictus all permanence deck. Vivictus has Madi the Dire. This is a super powerful card, and it has a World Gorger Dragon combo in it, so this deck is pretty powerful. But ultimately, like if the opponents just destroy Vivictus because he's such a game warper, then the deck is just like your regular kind of Jund value deck. Balthor the Defiled, he's mono black zombie kind of combo, kind of zombie tribal deck. Essentially, I morality shift my whole library into my graveyard. Morality shift switches your library and graveyard. Then I cast my commander Balthor, pay 3, exile him, and return all the black cards from my graveyard to the battlefield. And I've got like 20-some zombies, and all the ones that say when creatures die, your opponents lose life. So it's got an Aristocrat sub-package in it, and it's got Grey Merchant of Asphodel in it. So when you cast your commander, you sacrifice him, you pretty much win. This is one of my favorite decks. I bring it to events all the time. So if you're into zombie tribal, let me know, we'll jam a game. I've got a jank, non-combo, just good stuff Captain Sisay deck. No Paradox Engine, no stacks, no nothing like that. My friends give me crap about it all the time because it's not very tuned. It just plays a bunch of really powerful stuff. You know, you cast Sisay Tapper, search for a legendary card. I just search for like Iona or Avacyn and just jam powerful magic cards. It's kind of like my Bryon Stoutarm deck. Almost done. I've got in my hand here one of my favorite creatures of all time. Lord of Tresserhorn. Red, black, blue, 1, 10, 4. He's a zombie. He's got black to regenerate. And when he enters the battlefield, I have to pay 2 life, sacrifice 2 creatures, and target opponent draws 2 cards. Oh, what a beating. This is just a terrible magic card. But it's legendary, it's Grixis, and it's awesome when you play it in a deck where you trade political advantage to the opponent that you're letting draw cards. Hey, I'm going to cast my commander. You can draw 2, but don't attack me. It's awesome when every other creature in the deck has a dies trigger. When it dies, draw a card. When it dies, reanimate a guy. When it dies, search for a mana. Awesome deck. So fun to play. I take this deck with me most times as well. Super jank. If anybody wants to sit down and play super casual, this is the deck that I play. My last 2 decks are my CEDH decks, so I'll just say what they are and kind of move on because they're kind of on rails. They're a little bit scripted because they do the same thing every time, a la all CEDH decks. They are Anamar Soul of Elements, which is 100% altered art. Every card in it has altered art. Super awesome. I call it my stack of business cards because that's what my actual real job is. So if anybody ever wants to see that at an event, I usually have that one on me as well, just to show it off and kind of advertise. I'm super vain and lame like that. And then my other actual CEDH deck is Zadahedron Grinder. Mono red Storm, and it's got like a Goblin Swarm, kind of empty the Warrens, pump your guys sub-theme. So if you're keeping track at home, that is 13 decks. What I'm interested in knowing is how many decks do you have? Do you rank them? Do you have an idea of where they fit in the Commander community at large? Do you play some at a certain kind of event or at the kitchen table? Do you jam some only when you play in events? Do you optimize all your decks, or do you just build them and move on? Let me know how you do it. Over the next month or so, I'm going to be looking at some of my actual build process, and it's going to be geared at some of the newer listeners, some of the newer Magic players who listen. And I'm going to be going through, how do you build your mana base, and how do you pick creatures that go into certain decks and stuff. And I'm going to be using some of my decks as an example. So that's why I wanted to go over them today. But I want to hear from everybody how they do it, and maybe a list of all your commanders. Maybe that's something I'll put on Facebook or Twitter. Like, you can reply with a list of all your commanders, because I know that 13 is a lot, but to some people 13 is not very much, right? Like, all mine fit in like a hard camera case with foam, Some people have 3 or 4 and they just want to super tune them and play the crap out of them. Some people just build them and forget them and end up having like 25 decks. I'm not including precons in my count because I own all the precons, but they kind of get cannibalized and ripped apart for other stuff or to paint cards in them or whatever, right? So I have 13. Let me know how many you have. Okay, last section of the day, and the section that I had the most feedback on from last week. This is the set retrospective. Last week we talked about Arabian Nights and everybody loved it. Everybody who started playing back then and had a trip down memory lane loved it. I'm sure the same people are also going to love today's set retrospective, Antiquities. And holy crap, I'm going to start before I even get into Antiquities. I'm going to start by saying, does anybody remember when Magic novels were good? Now, hear me out. When Magic first, or Wizards of the Coast, first started producing novels, they were pretty bad. And then they tried their hand at some comic books, also bad, all failures for lack of a better term. But then they got some good authors and they produced some good books. And the Antiquities set is laid out for us in the book called Brothers' War by Jeff Grubb. If anybody's read that and can relate it to Antiquities, get at me on Twitter at CADPopcast, because dang, that was a good book. I liked it. Maybe I'm bad at like knowing what good books are, but I like that book and I love this set. It was before my time too, but man, I'm telling you, it's good. Read it. Get it from wherever you can get it. I don't know if you want to shop on Amazon or whatever, but whatever. Get that book. Brothers' War, Jeff Grubb. Antiquities. March of 94. So this is like 4 months after Arabian Nights came out, and they like blew through Arabian Nights. It was instantly sold out, and now Antiquities had to come out like super fast. And they learned some stuff. They increased their print run, and they added like a few more cards to the set. This set has 85 cards, and 20 of them are rare. Ooh, yeah, it had rares in this set. This is the set with the little anvil, right? And of course, black border. It was reprinted in white border in Chronicles, and that destroyed Magic and gave us the reserve list, all this stuff, right? But whatever. These are black bordered ones. And of course, I've got the set up in front of me, and I'm looking through it just real quick before I get to my notes on the actual few things that I wanted to talk about. And I'm looking at the cards, and I'm seeing artists Christopher Rush, Mark Poole, Amy Weber, Douglas Schuler, Anson Maddox. These are still people, not Christopher Rush because he's passed away, but these are people who still are involved in the Magic community. When you go to a Magic Fest, you will still see these people. Mark Tedden is another one. Like, I just went to Magic Fest Calgary a couple months ago, and Mark was there. He signed my Soul Ring. He signed my Mana Crypt. He signed some Urza lands for me. I met Mark Poole in Vegas. I met Anson Maddox and his wife in Vegas, and get this, they offered to sell me the original oil painting of Lord of Tresserhorn. And I'm sort of kicking myself that I didn't buy it because they said they were putting it up for auction, but it was also like $1,300 or something was their price. And probably should have bought it. It's probably worth more than that in the year it's been since then, just because Magic's a little bit exploding right now. But these people are still around. That's the point, right? And if you've got any of these old cards, this is old school, like acrylic on board or oil on canvas type paintings, right? It's not digital. Nothing is digital. So if you're into that, definitely check out some of these old cards, because a lot of them are still cheap. Or because they've been reprinted, it's sort of kept the original printings in check. They are more expensive, but they aren't crazy expensive. So the first couple things I want to talk about and get out of the way are the expensive cards, like I did last time. We're talking Mishra's Workshop. You can tap it to add 3 mana to your mana pool, but you can only spend it on artifacts. That sees playing Vintage. It's super powerful. If you've got like just truckloads of money and you want to play artifact decks in Commander, definitely try and get that card. But if you don't have truckloads of money, don't get that card. Candelabra of Tonos is kind of in the same boat. It's an artifact. You can tap X and untap X lands. And I had an opportunity to pick this card up like maybe 10 years ago for $35, and I didn't, and now it's like 1,000 or something. I don't know if it's 1,000, but it's super lots. So like those are the 2 most expensive cards in the deck, or in the set, sorry. I want to talk about the card Millstone, and Millstone is the reason that the archetype or the strategy is called mill. So any new players, when you hear mill, what that means is somebody targets you with a spell or an effect or whatever, where you're taking cards off the top of your library and putting them directly into your graveyard or exiling them. Either could be called mill. And Millstone in Antiquities gave that strategy that name. Millstone's an artifact for 2. You can pay 2 and tap it. Target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Not super great in Commander. I wouldn't recommend you play that card, but in old school Magic, when you're 60 card decks, if you had any number of Millstones, because you could play any number of cards back then, and you had like 10 Millstones, you just tap and mill your opponent maybe like in 2 turns. So that was cool, right? And it was it saw a bunch of reprints all the way up to M19 it was printed in. And I don't know, maybe there's sometime in the history of Magic there was a mill deck that used it in Limited to mill your 40 card deck of your opponents. I don't know. Anyways, Antiquities was the first set to introduce the same card that have different arts as well. And those are evidenced in like Mishra's Factory. It's a land that taps for colorless, but you can pay 1 to make it a 1/1 or something, right? A 2/2. And that had a spring, summer, fall, and winter art. So they had 4 different seasons. And the 4 different seasons on that card, some of them are more expensive than others, but in the Magic card altering community, when people want like play sets and stuff done, they'll want their play set of, let's say, like a Noble Hierarch or a Llanowar Elf or something to have all different arts. The spring ones are usually filled with a whole bunch of flowers and it looks all green. And the summer ones, it looks just green, no more flowers. The fall ones, of course, look like red and brown because all the leaves are autumn colors. And then the winter ones have snow. Just like the original Mishra's Factories from how long ago? 25 years ago, right? So super awesome card. I actually play that in my Zadahedron Grinder deck because you can tap it to make it a 2/2, like itself a 2/2. It's another target for a Zada Replicate spell. If we're sticking to the land, Strip Mine had that as well, and so did the Urza lands, Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, and Urza's Power Plant. They all had different arts. So if you wanted a play set of the Urzatron lands, they have, you'd need 12 different cards with 12 different arts. And the Strip Mine, just like the Mishra's Factories, there's some that are more expensive and less expensive. Going through the actual set, I'm looking at Argivian, you tell me, I don't know, tell me I'm wrong on Twitter. Argivian Archaeologist, white 1 for a 1/1. You can pay white and tap it to bring an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. They didn't know about the color pie at this time in the game, right? Like they're 1 year into the game and they're trying to give each color a way to kind of do each thing, right? And white reanimates your artifacts. There's another one that breaks the color pie in Gate to Phyrexia. I love this card. Black for an enchantment. You sack a creature to destroy an artifact. You can only do it on your upkeep, so there is a limitation on it, but I mean, sack a creature in black, you probably want to do that anyways, to destroy an artifact, which you can't do outside of, I think, like one other card in all of black. So that card is super awesome. We've got a couple other like super Eternal format all-stars. In Hurkyl's Recall. It bounces all artifacts in play at instant speed for blue 1. That card is crazy powerful. If you got 10th edition Russian foils, get at me. Maybe we can set up a trade. And also power artifacts. That makes the activated ability of an artifact you control cost 2 less mana. So it actually creates infinite mana with Grim Monolith. I think that's a common combo in EDH, because you can do it like turn 2, right? You maybe like land, Sol Ring, Grim Monolith, turn 1. Then you go second land. Both your lands are islands, of course. You go blue, power artifact, enchanting your Grim Monolith. So it taps for 3 and untaps itself for 1 mana now. So you net 2 mana and you have an untapped Grim Monolith. So you tap it for 3, untap it for 1. You net 2 mana again. You just do that 7 trillion times, and then I don't know what you do with infinite mana. Maybe you damage everybody, but that's a pretty powerful combo there. We've got the card Ornithopter. I was just about going to say it was the first ever 0-drop, but no, Alpha Beta Unlimited all had those. It's a 0/2 flyer for 0. And going back to that Brothers War novel, Ornithopter was a thing that Urza and Mishra had found in the desert when they were exploring for artifacts, and they built one. And the Ornithopter card is a representation of that happening in the story. Super cool. Couple others, because we're getting long on time here. We've got Shatterstorm, destroy all artifacts for red 2. That's functionally a artifact Wrath of God in red. Transmute artifact. You search your library for an artifact, place it directly into play. Both super powerful cards. And finally, I think, best card in the set for Commander, a Tog. Just kidding. Best card in the set for Commander, Ashnod's Altar. So crazy, part of so many combos. 3-drop artifact, sacrifice a creature to make 2 colorless mana. It's the cornerstone of, you name it. Like, literally go onto Google and Ashnod's Altar combo, and you'll get 7 trillion hits with all these kinds of different cards that let you sack creatures to get mana. Great card. Been reprinted, I think it was in Chronicles, or 6th edition maybe. And then it was in a Masters set where you could get it in foil. No. Get your Antiquities copies. They got the old art, the old frame, the black borders. That's a nice card. That's really good. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed the set retrospective on Antiquities. I hope it maybe sparked your memory or put a smile on your face, walked you down memory lane, or inspired you to go looking at old art and old cards, because there are some gems way back in the day that aren't just dual lands. Let me know about your deck building process, or how many decks you have and who they are, of course. And then big shout out to Joseph for sending in the story about helping the foster kids that he is assigned to or paired with. That was super awesome to hear about and to share with everybody. If you'd like to send in your own story, you can get after me on Twitter at CADPopcast. You can send an email to cadpopcast@gmail.com, or you can shoot a message to me on Facebook when you search Commander Ad Populum. Don't forget to check out patreon.com/CADPopcast for the latest and greatest. I'm still tweaking it, like I said. I'm still adding in some of the altar stuff that I think everybody might be interested in. And I'm actually even looking at adding altered art tutorial videos once I get that going. So if you're into any of that, let me know. If you have any suggestions, let me know. And of course, one last big thank you to Brent for the logo submission. I really appreciate it. And to everybody else who helped out, gave me ideas, or submitted logos. I really do appreciate that, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.